From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast.
The fastest growing entertainment phenomenon of this generation.
I, Prophet of Esports, joined today by my friend and co-host William Collis.
Yeah, we got the book of esports out. It's a big deal.
So everyone knows me as the Prophet and William as the Professor.
They may call me the Prophet, but in my life outside of the business of esports, I have worked on the investment side of the table for the better part of the last 2 decades. The single fastest growing area of gaming and esports is gambling. It's booming right now. You don't need to be a prophet like me to see that. However, as an investor, I've stayed away from gambling and betting companies because of the reputational risk and often shady nature of the companies involved. This was true until now. I've recently bought stock in a new public company called Esports Entertainment Group, or EEG, which is focused on esports and gambling. The big difference that changed my mind is that EEG is a public company, NASDAQ listed, and fully regulated, focused on esports betting. The regulatory and audit requirements of a public company are key in my mind to provide the needed transparency for players, bettors, and investors. I had an opportunity to host the CEO of EEG on this podcast a couple of months ago, and I was very impressed by his vision for the company. We've stayed in touch, and I'm delighted to announce that they've accepted to become a sponsor of the podcast. If you're a family office, institutional investor, or investor of any kind, really, Esports Entertainment Group, ticker symbol GAMBLE, GMBL, might be one of the best ways to get exposure to the esports betting space and gaming in general. Make sure to check them out at esportsentertainmentgroup.com. Having said that, I need to make sure to state that this is only my opinion. I'm not an investment advisor or selling stock in the company. Please make sure you do your own research and seek advice from a licensed professional if you're looking to invest in the field. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast. I am Paul Dewalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, William Collis. For those of you who are new to the podcast, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do here is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. Thank you for all the 5-star ratings and reviews. Thank you for all the love, telling other people about the podcast. It has grown like wildfire thanks to you guys. By the way, please go buy the Book of Esports on Amazon. William wrote an amazing book covering not just the history, but the business side of gaming in such an amazing way. And I know so many of you have bought the book. And if you have, go leave a review on Amazon. Go tell William how much you love the book. I know he would appreciate it. William, how's it going? How you doing this week?
It's going really well, Paul. You know, there's a lot of fun stuff happening in esports, and it's always fun to be here.
You know what? I feel bad though.
Why?
Because I only remembered like literally 10 minutes before we started filming this podcast.
My birthday?
It wasn't your birthday?
No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
Oh.
Sorry, listeners. Sorry. I couldn't resist. It's April Fool's when we record. Actually, it's not April Fool's. It's the day before.
It's not April.
Yeah.
Yes, you will be listening.
You'll
to
get
this
it on April Fool's. So it will be a timely joke when you receive it. Yeah. Yeah. What were you going to say, Paul?
No, I just remembered you invited me to play Valorant last night, and I totally got lost in what I was doing, and so I apologize. How did it go?
Not only that, Paul. Not only did I invite you to play Valorant, but I actually played Valorant well for the first time in my life.
Like, you played pretty decent with me.
No, I was like top. I was like the lead KDA in like many games. I'd have games where I was going like 25-8. Like it was really good. But then people were saying that what I was doing was potentially bad manners because apparently you're not supposed to buy Odin in unranked. Like, is that a thing? Is that, I don't know. But
It's
like,
a little, I won't say, I mean, it's not, there's nothing wrong with it, I think,
like
right? Like,
I didn't know it's in the
what were they
store. It's in the
accusing you
store.
of?
What? Well, like, I
Were you
mean,
accused of being toxic? Is that it?
no, no, no. The Odin is very low skill as well. I don't know enough about Valorant to really judge, but basically, like, the Odin, if you crouch and ADS or aim down sights, like, and you kind of watch a corner, it's pretty easy to get kills, even when you have, horrific reflexes like I do. So, I kind of stuck to that strategy with a very boring play style, but it paid off, like, I don't know what to say.
You
So
won though?
yeah, 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 I won, and I won a lot until I started to vary my approach because, I would be on defense a lot, right? You switch the rounds, you switch the half or whatever, right? And I thought to myself, well, why do I have to defend? What's the incentive here? Like, I'm gonna just play both rounds like I'm the attacker, and that never worked. But I had a lot of fun doing it. So
But I love that you used it also, I feel like, because, and just to tie it back to business, you used
yeah.
it as a corporate, like a company building, team building exercise, right?
That's exactly right. So to tie it back to business, we have, some new people joining, some of the companies I work for, right? And it's a real concern about office culture. What do you do? Because it's COVID, so it's tough to have an office, right? And so you have these new people who are starting, like, you want them to feel like they're working for an esports company and to feel like it's going to be a fun company. I hope that. So like, what are things you can do, remotely to foster team building and communication and get people to relax? And I mean, playing games is awesome. And it helps that we're an esports company, so it feels on point. But I would say to anyone who's listening in business, like, it's a really great team building exercise. People relax very quickly. They talk much more freely. They get to know each other under pressure. Like, it's really good. I've been using playing games in corporate settings for years, and it's always been fun for me. I say, I don't
But
know,
as
fun
your
for people who play with
as
me
the
because
top
I'm
frag
terrible.
on your
Mm.
team, you were not like berating your teammates slash employees
Well,
for,
like, I mean, no. I mean, oh my God, what sort of monster do you think I am? No, because there's no point. Like, first of all, I would never do that. But second of all, like, what's the benefit? Like, play better? Like, first of all, I've had many people tell me to play better because I'm not very good, right? And like, it doesn't help. You just feel bad and nobody has a good time. But like, the second is, it's like, it's not constructive. Like, games are all about, I believe it's about, like, you know, like, you can say constructive things like, hey, maybe you shouldn't buy the sniper rifle if you're not very good at aiming. Maybe you should buy like like a shotgun. You can say things like that, which is fine, but like, that's useful advice. It's actionable. But it's like, it would be like coaching a soccer team and being like, wow, score more goals. Like, come on, complete those passes. Like, it's not helpful, so no,
um,
but yeah, but no, but yeah. But not only do I get to open this podcast by talking about Valorant, which is a great joy, but we have a great guest, right, Paul?
we do have a great guest, someone who may be better than Valorant at Valorant than both of us. I actually
That's
don't
a
know.
we'll have to ask. That's a distinct possibility. Yeah.
But we have none other than Lagen Nash, who is the Chief Revenue Officer at Misfits Gaming. Lagen, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. You guys would definitely kick my butt in Valorant. There's no question there.
Actually, legitimately, Paul is very good at first person. He's very good.
I don't doubt it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Lagen,
Paul's like,
welcome
that's
to
the whole
podcast.
reason I do this podcast is the acclaim.
Lagen, welcome to the podcast. For our listeners, I think most of our listeners will have heard of Misfits Gaming. Obviously, huge organization in the esports world. But would love if you could give them your background, some of the context around what you did before maybe you got into gaming, why you got into gaming, what you're focused on now at Misfits. I think our audience would love some of that context.
Yeah. And I actually think, I'm probably a different breed in the esports industry because I came from the traditional media side. And when I joined Misfits, I had a very little grasp on the gaming ecosystem, kind of the intricacies that you guys are talking about. I knew very high level. So it's been an exciting and constant learning experience for me the past year and a half since I've been at Misfits. And so to kind of go back in my career, I worked at Fox for 9.5 years. So right when I graduated college, I went to Fox. I started at the regional sports networks, Fox Sports Net, in the production side. And then about a year after that, I moved to a rep firm within Fox Sports that sold media for the RSNs. So I was more on the sales kind of planning side of the business. And then about a year after that, Fox was going to invest and start a new group to compete with the IMG and the Learfields of the world, where we were going to invest into college rights, so property rights. So the first school that we purchased the multimedia rights from was USC, and I was on that team for about 4 years, and we grew tremendously. Our portfolio of schools, went from like 1 to about 10 at the end of it. Big conferences like the Big East we sold. We had deals with Georgetown, San Diego State. So we grew it substantially. And that was more on the sponsorship side. So there I was doing very traditional sponsorships, but I had the powerhouse of Fox behind me to support it with media. So I had like both worlds. And then in my last stint at Fox, about it was from 2016, 17 to before that, 2015, 16 to 19. When Fox got bought by Disney. I worked for a team called Global Partnerships, and this team was created by Randy Freer, who at the time was the chief operating officer at Fox. And this team was to go brand direct and bring in new revenue for Fox across all of its networks. So Fox Sports, FX, Nat Geo, consumer products, film. And what our goal was, we had about a 500-person ad sales team, right? So we didn't go to the agencies. We were focusing on brands on, okay, what are your KPIs? What are you looking to do? And how can we take what your goals and ambitions and kind of business focuses are, and what asset makes the most sense in the 21 CF portfolio? So we were kind of like consultants that were going out to the marketplace representing 21st Century Fox, which is the whole portfolio company. So I did that, which we had tremendous success. And then in 2019, we got bought by, I think everyone knows, the Walt Disney Company. And at that time, I had been at Fox for 9 years, and I was like, okay, this is the perfect time to make a switch. I had, kind of been there a long time since I was out of college. And this opportunity at Misfits came to me. And like I said in the beginning, I knew gaming, I knew Blizzard, I knew Call of Duty, I knew Overwatch. So I had a general idea. And I was like, you know what? It's booming. I know a lot about it. And at that time too, and it was very important, companies like Misfits were bringing in non-traditional people, right, outside the gaming world, to bring in a different lens of perspective, especially in the partnerships world, because we were trying to get non-endemic brands. So I took the leap of faith. Ben Spoon at Misfits Gaming took the leap of faith and hired me. And I jumped in, and I had a lot of learning to do just from the kind of the basics of the esports business. But it's funny, as you dive into it, and I'm sure you guys have talked about this all on this podcast, the similarities between traditional sports, media, and esports from a business perspective, especially the partnerships revenue side, very similar, very similar. So yeah, so here I am today. I Chief Revenue Officer of Misfits Gaming Group. I have a team of about 10. When I joined, I had one person, so we've scaled tremendously. Globally, I have people in London, Florida, myself in Los Angeles, and with the pandemic, we're really all over the map these days. So it's been an exciting time, and you guys have seen some stuff in the trades that we've been doing, and we continue to grow. And I have an awesome team. I mean, they are really the best in the business.
Very cool. Sorry, William, go ahead.
Oh yeah, Lagen, I just want to ask, just for the viewers too, just because I think Misfits Gaming operates in a number of major titles, and I just think it's helpful for some of the context for our discussion. Can you just remind our listeners like the marquee games that you think Misfits participates in, just to sort of set the stage for the conversation we'll go?
Yeah, of course. So we have 3 franchise properties. We have our League of Legends team, which participates in the LEC, which operates out of Berlin, Germany. And then we have our 2 Activision Blizzard franchises. We have the Florida Mutineers and Call of Duty. And then we have the Florida Mayhem and Overwatch, which both operate out of our headquarters in Boca Raton, Florida. So those are our 3 franchise properties. And then we also have various content creators, influencers, streamers that stream Fortnite, etc. So that's kind of how our organization is set up, William, kind of with what the games that we're invested in.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because you're one of the few orgs that actually owns the Triple Crown, right? Like there are
Correct.
many orgs that will own one or sometimes two, particularly within the within the Activision Blizzard landscape. It's not that
Yeah,
uncommon to
yeah.
have both Overwatch and Call of Duty, but you're basically pretty alone. I think there's only two other orgs that have the Triple Crown, right? Is there some perspective there about owning three franchises, or the decision strategically to double down on a heavy franchise play? Like, I'm just really curious because it's a very unique asset set in esports.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the trifecta that we have really is a unique offering in the marketplace. And when I say the League of Legends team in the LEC, it's very interesting how high the viewership is for our LEC team in the US. So they really complement each other well. And as we continue to look and invest in various games, we look at our other three franchises. Okay, so what could this potential game do to the other three from a revenue standpoint to build on, right? Is it from a geographical standpoint, is it a non first person shooter game? Like, what are we looking at that can really kind of build our trifecta portfolio of games?
But so actually right there, sorry, Paul, this might be a little in the weeds, but you touched on
No.
something I think is absolutely fascinating, right? And sort of this, because I think you brought up the traditional parallels between sports and esports. And I think one of the big tensions that we have in esports is how global can these team brands be, right? And I
Yep.
think you raise an excellent point, which is, look, Misfits is a European team, but it has tons of fans in the United States, right? Like, it has a huge audience. But that is
Yep.
less common in traditional sports that you have. And again, obviously there are people who, like Manchester United and follow the Premiership in America, but it's not the same as, say, following your local NFL team. So how does
Correct.
that experience and candidly the success that you guys have enjoyed with, the franchise league for Riot out of Europe balance with something like the Mutineers, which, has more of a geographic focus, given the structure of that Call of Duty league? I'm just curious for your thoughts there.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's like COVID has definitely caused some, I would say ripples in that. I mean, the core of owning a DMA, right, is to grow that local fan base. And with COVID, last year, the Call of Duty League launched, right? And so we were a week away from having our first Overwatch event in Florida and canceled. So we have yet to really be able to kind of curate and own that Florida market because we haven't had live events, right? When you look at right now, when you look at our audience breakout of our kind of our Call of Duty franchises, because it's been digital, it's very dispersed, right? We don't have it's not like the majority of our audience is coming from Florida because we haven't had the
Mm.
opportunity to kind of build the brand there. Um, so went back to your question of like the Riot, our Riot franchise team and how that's kind of their audience has helped from a sales perspective. Yeah, I mean, my team goes in pitching. Obviously, it's a European asset, but if you really dive into the weeds of the audience breakout, the US viewership is huge. Now, you
Mhm.
guys know this from a business standpoint. Most companies' budgets are global, but then there's regionally specific, US, Europe. So getting brands to understand that, obviously it's based out of Europe, but it's got a massive reach in the US is something my team is constantly educating brands because I don't think people, like you alluded to, know that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's really fascinating. So yeah, I mean, we're constantly educating our partners and potential partners on the demographics of these games so they understand, because you would think, oh, the Florida Mutineers, we've got a massive Florida presence. Well, no, our audience is actually very dispersed, like I said, and key markets. So
Mm, mm.
it'll be interesting next year when we go back to live events to kind of see how that changes, having those core events in our DMAs. It will be very interesting to watch.
Uh,
Really interesting. Paul, do you have a question? Sorry,
yeah,
I feel
yeah.
like I
Megan,
opened
we
with two
talked
heavy
about
ones. Yeah.
we talked about you guys mentioned the trifecta, right? And I like that
Yeah.
word. Um, when you go in, like, into to pitch a potential sponsor, right? And we had Matt Archambault from Riot, who's the head of their partnerships for North
Yep.
America, and I
Yep.
asked him a similar question, which was like, when you go in and pitch a sponsor, are you pitching League and Valorant like together? Is it very like, or do you think of them very separately as like from a business and sales standpoint? Like, when you go in and pitch a potential partner, brand, sponsor, are you pitching, hey, we've got all three, we've got the trifecta, you want to do a deal across everything? or are you really sort of narrowing in on, we want to get you into the mayhem because we believe this is the right sort of fit for you guys? Or like, I'm curious how you think about managing all the assets you've got under Misfits,
Yeah,
and
it's a
how you
great
use them
question.
when you pitch.
Yeah, so I would say it's more of the latter. So what my team does is like when we're going to meet with a brand, if we have some sense of like what they're doing in the marketplace, or we have I have an amazing data team that pulls kind of, marketplace intelligence for us on like, okay, where are they investing? Kind of where's their marketing plans going? We really curate it. Like, so like if we're pitching a brand that's only in the US, right? We try to stick to our Blizzard franchises and our Fortnite streamers and that, because overall conceptually that's probably going to be the most that they buy into, right? Where like if we're pitching a brand out of the UK, depending on what the brand is, we would probably pitch LEC and maybe the Mutineer. I mean, it just depends. So I would say it's definitely the latter. We try to customize, unless we're going into a brand that's like, we want to know about Misfits Gaming Group, then yeah, we pitch the whole kit and caboodle just to give them an overview, which a lot of the times we do anyway, because a lot of the brands that we're trying to get into the esports space, as you guys know, they need to understand it. There's a big misconnect of them understanding what this is and how they can execute in it and what these games are and how they can play and live and breathe in them. So, it's both, but I would say more the latter.
You bring up a great point, and sort of my follow-up question here is, again, something I've brought up many, many times. And I think when you're inside the industry, people feel like this issue doesn't exist as much because we all understand what esports are and what the opportunity is. But, my belief is there still is this education gap with brands. I'm curious, if you believe that education gap still exists in a meaningful and widespread way, A, and B, when do you think, like, at what point in the future will you no longer be going in to pitch a brand and needing to explain sort of, what video gaming is or what an esport is or what Fortnite is or whatever, right? Like, is that future a year from now, or is it 5 years from now?
That's a great question. The education piece is still so important. I mean, even down to the basics of what Misfits Gaming Group is. A lot of times when I'm talking to brands or even, people interested in the company, I compare it to Madison Square Garden. It's like I got to take a traditional kind of sports entity and compare it so they can understand the structure of the company, how it works, because it's complicated. I mean, I told you guys, I came into this world and I remember sitting my first day, the guys were writing on a piece of paper for me, who is clicks? Like, I mean, I was like, getting it dumbed down. So, I think it's good because I understand that when we're pitching clients or whoever it may be, you have to take it to the very basics for them to understand this, because it's complicated and you could get really into the weeds really quick and you lose them. So it's for my team specifically, I really, really harp on anything we send, it really has to be spelled out clearly and simplistically, or people are gonna be like, what, huh? Like a lot of times on meetings, we'll pull up actually people streaming at the moment to show them like, okay, here's the, here's the overlay, here's the, the chat bot, like here are different things that you guys can see that's going live to really understand how this plays out. And so there's a huge educational curve. I would still say we're probably 5 years out from people being like, get it, got it. Like it's just the industry is growing so fast too. I mean, every day I'm learning about new platforms. I mean, I'm trying to keep up, and I'm old for the industry, so I'm like, my God, like, so yeah. I mean, it's definitely an educational perspective, and us as Misfits, we're trying to find innovative ways to educate people. Like, how can we make it fun and innovative where people are learning while experiencing it? So we're kind of ideating constantly on how to do that.
I have a question. It's a little abstract, but I'm kind of curious, and it goes back to the trifecta, I guess we're calling it, of the franchises Misfits owns.
I like that. I think I'm gonna have to use that now internally all the time. The
I
trifecta.
I liked Triple Crown, right? Like I liked Triple. I'm just saying, no, I'm kidding. But yeah, trifecta is very. But like my question is like, I'm curious. So how much of this is clearly a strategic choice, right? How much of this strategy is based on the merits of each individual franchise, and how much of it is based on what I would call the Pokemon approach, which is like you got to catch them all, right? So in other words, to sort of make the question concrete, let's say a fourth franchise appears. I don't know, and it could be something realistic or it could be made up. Like maybe there's a new game that launches tomorrow and it's super popular, and Zeeblebrox announces they're selling franchises, right? Like,
well, Valorant would be a good one because they're already in Riot.
The very realistic one, yeah.
Yep.
the approach that Misfits takes strategically to that? Is it we've made a decision to be in every franchise game, so let's go get this? Or like, what's the thinking behind new franchises as they evolve?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. So the first thing that when we look at franchise kind of opportunities is, okay, what's the game, right? What's kind of the vibe in the marketplace? Are people like, Valorant was like the hot thing coming out, right? Everyone was like, when are you having a Valorant team? When are you having a Valorant team? But it goes deeper than that, obviously. We have to figure out geographically where it makes the most sense. What kind of revenue can we drive from it? So like, we do a lot of discussions internally when it comes to games. Like when I mentioned first person shooters, brands are very cautious to get into that space. So it's like, is that the right game from a monetizable standpoint? Because you guys know these franchises aren't cheap. So someone's got to make the money up after we purchase it, which is on me. So we look at that like, okay, how much do we think we could drive enough revenue to justify the investment in this, right? And then the other thing that we look at is how does it, like you said, how does it complement the other properties that we have, right? And how can we bundle them and package them together so it's strategic and brands have a different voice within each of the properties. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, and you guys know this too. I mean, I tell our CEO this all the time, and we talk about all the time. Esports companies like Misfits are essentially media companies. That's what we're morphing into. I mean, so we are figuring out ways like what gets us to the next level, right? And how do we get there? And is it franchise games? Is it investing in influencers and content? What is that, right? And so we've kind of dipped our toe in all of it, as you can see, and we really analyze it to figure out, okay, what's the next investment we need to make that gets us to the next level?
I mean, that brings up my next question, which I was going to ask Lagen, which is the universe of like esports teams, and I think anyone who's a regular listener knows I'm not the biggest fan of at least some of the esports teams that are out there. And I would argue that some of them, it's mainly because I don't understand the strategy or the vision, right? Like there's a whole class of what I would call like hoodie orgs, like the 100 Thieves, where it's like, we don't really know what they're doing, but they sell a lot of hoodies. And then you have like the FaZe clans of the world, where it seems the strategy is to be more of a media / talent agency business. I would put the Cloud9s, or maybe like originally sort of in more of like they care about winning, or like a TSM, like we care about winning. And so it's about fielding the best sort of teams in every game. Like, where does Misfits fit into this esports team picture from a vision focus standpoint?
That's a
is it a
great
media
question.
business? Is it the hoodie org? Is it the, we want to win everything? Is it all of the above? I'm just curious.
I would say it's probably all of the above, but if I really had to kind of put my POV on it, I mean, look, we're never going to be a FaZe clan. We don't want to be a FaZe clan. That's like, we have different brand ethos and different brand objectives, right? So that's not who we compare ourselves to. I would say Misfits as an organization, the core kind of values of our company define who we are: diversity, inclusion, and we really hold true to that stuff. So I think, we really are becoming a traditional media company, and you'll see, and I hope you guys have me back one day to talk about this, but we're going to be announcing some stuff here that you guys will understand what I'm talking about, of how we're morphing into a media company and the road we're going down.
I mean, Lagen, you can announce it today. I mean, if you want to make a
I can't steal the thunder from some of my
Okay.
colleagues, but it's very cool stuff, and it's where I think, Ben and the investors of the company see the vision going, and it will help us not only grow as an esports organization, but really put us on the map as a true media company, and really diversify our offerings. So some exciting stuff down the road here in the next couple of weeks that you'll see hit the trades.
So it's interesting because your background was at Fox, right? I'm going to use William's words, because I think this is one of the most brilliant things William has ever said, and he says a lot of brilliant things. But
just the one, actually, but yeah.
but and William, sorry, I'm stealing it from you now. But like, William's philosophy is that, or theory is that, every good company eventually becomes Disney. And so, like, is the vision to just to turn that esports org into Disney, essentially?
God, we would love. I mean, Yes, like, I mean, you guys, I agree with William. Everything Disney touches turns into gold. I mean, it's like unbelievable. It's just,
Greatest company. All
it's the great,
businesses are just
yes.
in gradual stages of evolving into Disney.
It really is phenomenal. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So yeah, I think if we if we had to compare ourselves to like a company or myself when I think of Misfits, like Disney, absolutely. Um, go ahead.
Oh no, because okay, so if we want to finish your point, then I have a really interesting Disney related question to ask. I'm curious here, right?
Yeah,
Like,
so like I think yes, you look at esports companies, very similar lines of business to Disney, merchandise, IP, media. I mean, it's very similar, different scales, obviously, but very
Yep.
similar. So absolutely.
so my question here is like, so if you think of this is so if you think of Disney, part of why Disney is so successful is because they have this single strategic or this collection of strategic assets that they
Hmm.
build around, right? And it's
Hmm.
fundamentally down to the brands that they own. That's their strong. And I'm vastly simplifying here, but broadly, you can think of the success of Disney as the collection of brands they curate, and then everything comes from how they manage those brands.
Yep.
So I guess if that's the kernel of Disney, the question I'd have for you is what's the kernel for Misfits? Like, what would you say that single most important point of ownership and control is that drives the value for the organization?
It's a very, I would say it's our IP, right? And how we build upon the IPs that we own. And, I say this with my media hat on as I come over to Misfits. I mean, content is king, right? And what you do with content really drives the future of your business. And I would say our IP is, they're all very different. I mean, if you look at all three of our games and even our content, everyone, it's so different. So really building upon each of those properties that we own is kind of the kernel that I think gets us to what you're talking about, similar to Disney. I mean, it's like I said, very similar business models, just different scale.
Hmm. Hmm.
And one thing I wanted to touch on, you mentioned a couple of times now, was how shooters, first person shooters, are a bit of a tougher sell with brands. I'm curious, and this is more of a hypothetical question, but if you had some crystal ball and could get in the minds of every brand on the planet, what percentage would you say just want nothing to do with sort of first person shooter kind of activations
Hmm.
versus ones who are okay with it? Like, is it a majority that are not, you feel? Is it some small minority? How tough
I
is it?
think you got to break it out between endemics and non-endemics. If you look at non-endemics, I would probably say 30 to 40% no go on first person shooters. Where endemics, a lot less.
Interesting.
Um, but you know what we're trying to educate people on, and you guys know this from being in the esports world, is people don't associate first person shooters with actual events, tragic events that happen in the real world, right? Like we try not, like, it's just not thought of like that, right? It's a video game, it's fun, it's not. So we try to tell them, like, look, we don't support obviously the violence and all that outside of the video game. It's more from a pure entertainment standpoint. But we are very sensitive to brands that are just like not going to have it. So we find other assets that kind of could fit. But yeah, it's I would say it's definitely more of a sensitivity in the non-endemic worlds because they're not traditional to this space, right? So, and of course, with all in the world we live in today, there's a lot of incidents that I think hypersensitive has a sense of like this topic.
I mean, do you feel like it's just a question of time and education then? Because there's a lot of
Yeah,
stuff, like we've talked about research and studies that show that there's no connection, right, between like
right,
video games
right.
don't make you violent. Like there's a ton of research that supports that. Do you feel it's really just a question of time and education?
Yeah, and I think it's, you've had people in the past who are very powerful politicians alluding to violence associated with video games, right? So of course people are going to hear that and associate it if they're not in this ecosystem and like you said, understand the research and kind of that's not the mentality at all in this space. So yeah, I think it just takes time and obviously the brand's comfortability, right? As they get to understand the
Right.
games more and get more involved in this world, they'll adapt more, and it just takes time. And obviously we respect any brand's decision on that front because we understand the sensitivities, of course.
William, I don't know if you had anything else before we jump into some news here.
It's really interesting. No, I mean, I'm sure I maybe we can go back and see some of the stuff ties to news stories, but I think yeah, let's jump in because there's quite a lot that happened this week. There's some fun stuff to talk about, I think.
Yeah, and I think we obviously have to start with a Misfits Gaming related piece of news. I
There you
mean,
go.
the best part is I probably don't even need to introduce it. I won't even summarize it, Lagan. I will let you explain to our audience what's going on here. I will just say the headline: Misfits Gaming and SoFi renew partnership.
Yeah,
So what's happening here?
Yeah, so SoFi last year, 2019, they partnered with us as their first esports execution ever. And they really took the leap of faith with Misfits in trusting us to navigate their brand in this space. And they saw tremendous results across the board. They partnered only with our US assets, so kind of going back to our earlier discussion, only the Activision Blizzard franchises and our Fortnite and influencer content streamers. They did not do the LEC because they're a US only company. But they saw tremendous success. Their brand recognition, their brand lift across the board was through the roof in just 1 year. So as we kind of then, and the pandemic hit. So we, they pivoted with us as the rest of the world did, because a lot of the stuff that we were supposed to do for them was supposed to be live events and things like that. So they took a leap of faith with us and kind of worked through all of the stuff of last year that it brought to everyone, and yeah, it blew it out of the water. So we renewed their partnership again for this year. As you can see, a new asset that they are integrated in is the in-game jersey for Call of Duty, and I want to highlight it's broadcast only. So you only see that logo while the broadcast is going on for the league. But look, SoFi is a very innovative company. They always want to be a part of things that are innovating, industry changing, and this was a perfect asset that kind of spoke to what they look for when they're doing sponsorships. So super exciting. Again, they're going to be across all of our US assets in content. You'll see them on, I mean, you guys have probably seen them on the jerseys for the players. They'll be in the Mayhem season as it kicks off here soon. So yeah, lots of exciting stuff and very innovative.
I'm curious. This was obviously a renewal of a partnership, right? So it's been going on for some time now.
Yeah.
What was like the initial hook? Like, what was the first thing that got SoFi sort of at the table going, we have to partner with these guys. We have to do something with Misfits. What was that original hook?
Yeah. So I actually I worked with SoFi when I was at Fox.
Okay.
For a couple of years. And so when I took this job, I reached out to them and I was like, look, this is a space I think you guys would, should play in. Let's show you some stats, et cetera. And so took a while. We went back and forth. We kind of presented some, data that showed that this is their future customer, right? And they knew it. It's just sometimes it takes someone to kind of walk you through it to get them to buy in. And so they bought in, and that's how we kind of developed the relationship at Misfits, is really because they took the leap of faith with Misfits to show them that this is the audience that they want to hit.
William, I don't know if you have any thoughts on the partnership. There was one thing in the article that mentions a huge increase in brand trust. And I thought that was interesting. I had not heard really that metric used before. I don't know if you have thoughts on that, William.
Yeah, particularly because my understanding is that partnership is incredible. That's like Call of Duty is a big part of that, right? So
yes. Yep.
How it's interesting to see arguably the most, and this is maybe an unfair characterization, but arguably the most realistic violent shooter within the portfolio of Misfits being viewed as a driver of brand trust for SoFi. That's kind of an interesting parallel to draw, and I think speaks to how maybe people misunderstand games today and actually what is going on. I mean, is there something you could expand on there? Is that a thought that has value?
Yeah, no. So what we do for most of our partners is we do these surveys that we do pre, mid, and end of the season, and we hire a third-party data company to do it. And I think you hit the nail on the head, William. I think that's an exact indication of how people are. People think first-person shooting, equals violence, and it doesn't, because the stat there just shows it. So, I think our goal as partners to our brands is to continue to show stats like that, so they get comfortable in their understanding and they see the value, right? That it's that it is a positive reflection for their brand. So those surveys that we do across the board for our partners are key to kind of educating our brands on the success of partnering with these various games.
Guys, let's move on. We have this other story, and this is, call it a little bit of a follow-up to the discussion we had on that $500 million stadium that was announced in Toronto by Overactive Media. This is from the Architects newspaper, and the headline here is KOO designed Surge Esports Arena gets the go-ahead for Chicago's South Side. So basically, it's a $30 million arena. It got greenlit. It's going to be built on Chicago's South Side. It has the buy-in of the local government. It's going to be 1,000 seats, 108,000 square feet, and mostly dedicated to esports. There's no mention really of multi-use. There will be like IMAX style screens and things like that, but it's going to be primarily for esports. We had this discussion around the $500 million arena with 7,000 seats, and at least I was quite bearish on that. Also in the context now of Activision Blizzard basically saying, we're pivoting away from live events themselves, so that, and they let go of a bunch of staff a few weeks ago. I'm curious how you guys feel about another, call it very expensive stadium going up that's esports specific, although this is only 30 million relative to the 500 million of the Overactive one. Curious to get your thoughts on you think this is a good idea, this is a way better, or more effective kind of live event venue. Lagen, maybe start with you.
Yeah, I remember like right when I took this job before the pandemic, I mean, you were seeing stadiums popping up left and right for esports. I mean, future plans. I think it's a very smart move because you alluded to Activision Blizzard kind of pivoting away from these live events. The live events are being turned over to the teams, and that's how the teams are going to grow their local fan base, right? So for example, like the Florida Mutineers, we'll have the ability to host events in our DMA, and we need these spaces for not just one day. It's a long period of time that are expensive, right? So the financial model of building these, once we go back to live events, I think will make a lot of sense, and they're smart investments from my perspective. And I remember right before the pandemic hit, I went to the Call of Duty event out in Los Angeles, and I took my husband, and because we both had never been to it was the first season of Call of Duty, so we had never been to one of the events, and we were blown away at the environment, the hype, the well done production, just the overall experience of being at the event was amazing. So I really think that once we have back to live events, those kind of investments into actual esports facilities are going to be very lucrative.
Really,
I mean, William,
really
the $500 million stadium with 7,000 seats, my back of the envelope math said there's no way they ever return that capital. And they'd have to keep it 100% full basically every single day of the year, which seemed unlikely. This stadium seems way more reasonable and way more focused. Are you a fan of this model more, like much smaller cost, very esports
that's
focused?
What I was gonna say is like the sizing feels much more manageable here, right? Like
Definitely.
This feels like the sort of thing where you could fill it. There's, pretty regularly, right? There's probably consistently events that might draw 1,000 people, right? Whereas 5,000 is tough, right? Like there's a big difference between, getting a hardcore base to show up and then, the next increment on the fan base. So I think
I think over time though, you'll see these events scale up. I think for right now, what you're saying, yes, the smaller kind of more intimate environment is probably where you're going to see the most success. But I think as these leagues get more market visibility and been out longer, these events are going to blow up.
Yeah, the question is where on the scale curve do you build for and when? And that kind of goes to your point, Lagen, a little, which is as much as I think I probably abstractly prefer this, I do worry a little because think about this, you still have a payback period of years here, right? You still have a payback period of years.
Absolutely, yep.
And, if Mutineers are only getting 1,000 fans to their games, say 5 years from now, right? That probably doesn't sound like a great place for Misfits to be, right? So the point I'm making here is the hope is these teams will scale quickly and the local events and the activations. Does that mean this event is the wrong size because this arena is the wrong size because you get scaled out before you earn back your returns on the space. In other words, like if what the teams want to have happen happens, is this too small? It'll look really smart for a year or two, and then no one will book it because you'll say, I can't leave half my fans out. I can't leave a fifth of my fans out. You can't do it. Yeah.
It is a weird like exercise too in terms of sizing these things, right? Like the $500 million stadium, I think, and I know, I believe, I don't know who said it. It was me, you, was like, you can spend 500 million, but now you can't even bring like the League of Legends World Championship there, right? Because
Right.
7,000 seats is way too small for that, but it's also too big for like the Toronto Ultra every week, right? And so like, what do you do with, how do you size these things correctly, knowing there will be growth, but there's a huge amount of fixed cost up front? It's challenging. Like, I haven't seen one where I think unanimously all of us go, oh my God, this is going to work for the next 20 years.
Well, I think you're going to look at traditional sports. I mean, most of the arenas, the big arenas like Staples Center, they have Nokia Theater, right? Like they have comparable spaces for various size events. So I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting when they look at the financials of these events, what their 12, 15, 20-year projections are, because you're right. I mean, if these events start to get bigger and bigger, they will scale themselves out of these. But I think what's going to happen too is you're going to have more exclusive events, different types of, like, whether it's amateur, et cetera, events that are going to have that kind of crowd. I mean, there's so many different ways to kind of swing it. But I'm a firm believer that live events are going to come back hot next year. And I think there's a lot of potential here. I don't know about $500 million in one of these places, but
Well,
I think
Lagen,
there's a lot of potential.
There's the question there, is Misfits going to build their own venue?
You know what? It's definitely, it's been thrown on our table, put it that way. We've looked at various models, and I think there's a chance. I think, but like you said, we got to look at the financials, and I think we need to develop a little bit more of a grounding in the marketplace before we really put our stake into an investment like that. Because, like I said, we haven't had any events in Florida yet for our Call of Duty and our Overwatch franchises. So we got to see kind of what the momentum is, and like we talked about, how it scales.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I wonder if the answer is not just like most teams should probably be reusing existing sports arenas first, right? Until there's sort of a clear sense of how big these events really can be. Can we make them profitable, right? Can you scale this to some, like, what like, no one knows what this growth curve looks like over the next 10 years. Everyone, I think, agrees it's going to grow, but is it, we're 2xing every year, or are we 3xing every year? Are we, or are we growing 5% every year? There's no, like, I think because no one has visibility there, my concern is these big upfront capital expenditures worry me a little bit. Now, I don't know if Chicago, like some city government, is paying, half the cost here, and therefore the financials work beautifully. Like, there's a lot of details that we just don't know.
Right. I'm a firm believer too, and I say this to my team all the time, that you will see with these live events and even the esports ecosystem in general, entertainment and esports colliding way more. So what I mean is, maybe there's concerts that lead up. I mean, there's just so much opportunity because the audience and the passion is so similar, that I think that's a big feature of live events, especially in the esports world, is bringing in that entertainment music factor, like you see in Fortnite. I mean, but really to like a live event scale, especially for these local events that the teams have to hold.
Guys, let's move on to actually, before we move on to our last story, I just have two quick words, or one quick word actually. You guys know I'm as an investor, I've stayed away from the esports betting space. There's just so much reputational risk there. That's been true up until now. We recently had the CEO of a company called Esports Entertainment Group on the podcast. They're a NASDAQ listed company, fully regulated. They're in the esports betting space in a really big way. If you're looking to invest in that space, if you're looking to play, if you're an individual investor, a family investor, highly recommend checking out esportsentertainmentgroup.com. The ticker symbol is GMBL. Disclaimer, having said that, I'm not selling securities here. This is not advice to buy stock. What I'm telling you is go seek out a professional, licensed professional, if you're looking to invest in the field. guys, Rocket League. Let's talk Rocket League. Okay, Rocket League has been. I saw a story last week. Let me just preface this. A story last week that said Rocket League was esports' best bet at success, best chance of success.
Mm.
It was an editorial, right? It's an opinion piece. But the crux of it was something we've talked about before, which is Rocket League is soccer with cars. It's dead simple. And therefore, it has potentially the largest mainstream esports audience possible. Now, in that context, which I think is an interesting thought, I saw this story this week from esports.net saying Rocket League is actually launching a mobile iteration of their game called Rocket League Sideswipe. It's going to be releasing soon. It's going to come to iOS and Android. And they're taking essentially a similar route to what League of Legends has now done with Wild Rift, which I think went live yesterday or a couple days ago, in the US at least. So Rocket League's gone free to play. Now they're going mobile. Do either of you think this could be a massive esports hit? Like where are you on Rocket League mobile here in the context of Rocket League in general? Lagen?
Oh, I think it's a massive hit. I mean, I've seen some of the mobile numbers come across my desk recently on various other games, and it's astronomical. And I think from a audience and monetization standpoint, it's a slam dunk, is my opinion.
Do you
Yeah,
see? Do you guys see? Sorry, just let me frame it. Like, could we? Rocket League has done well as an esport, right? But it's not done League of Legends well. And so you have all these people saying it should be the biggest thing ever because it's the simplest, right? Is Rocket League mobile the thing that propels Rocket League to esports sort of dominance?
I think it has a good shot. Is my gut on this. I just think it, like you said, the simplicity of it, the access to play it on your phone. I mean, it checks a lot of boxes that I think people will be interested in. So I think it will have tremendous success in my opinion.
William, sorry, you were going to say something.
I mean, I just you just can't, as much as it's, and I think it's easy for hardcore gamers to look at the mobile space and be dismissive of it. It's just the numbers are so large. And then
So large.
even for you who like say a hardcore fan of controller PC, based Rocket League, PlayStation based Rocket League, like, isn't it nice to have it in your phone so you can play it on the train? I think that it seems to me that the magic formula does appear to be to take a entrenched but PC only property and broaden its filter in through the mobile lens, right? And I think we've seen that time and time again. I mean, Fortnite being arguably the best example of this. And I think this entire podcast and all the criticisms and sort of debate we've had around the fight with the App Store is largely due to the fact that Fortnite mobile really matters to the success of that brand. And I think the question is not like if something like this will work for Rocket League, because it will, like the writing's on the wall. The question is, how fast are other brands going to figure this out and get their mobile offerings in market? Because yes, everybody remembers Diablo Immortal, and there's right ways to announce and wrong ways, right? But fundamentally, I think pretty much, in the next few years, if you are a AAA brand, a AAA gaming brand, and you don't have your brand extension in mobile, I don't think you can be AAA. I think it's becoming the price of entry.
I hate that you brought up that very traumatic experience.
You didn't what? You don't have a phone, Paul? You don't have a phone?
Please don't make me relive that. I mean, William, look, and by the way, go buy the book of esports. But in your book, you talk about business models around games so much, right?
Yeah.
If when book 2 comes out and we're talking about business models around esports, right, and games, will the conclusion be there's no variety anymore? The formula is free to play on console and PC, game as a service. Then you go mobile, basically. Like that. That's like, this is the formula now. Period.
The conclusion is we're heading to is the phrase Lagrange point, I think. Like,
oh no,
that's like
for our 4 mathematician followers.
It's actually a physics term, I think. It's like the point between planets where the gravity is perfectly neutral, so you just stay, You know what I mean? Like there's nothing pulling you in one. I think it's that somebody's going to tell me I'm an idiot. It's something else. But anyway, I'll look really smart. But I think it feels to me like we're heading to a Lagrange point for revenue models for AAA games, right? Where we've worked out this magic formula for what you need to do in today's market, how you need to penetrate, the ways you need to monetize. It's a combination of free to play, microtransactions, mobile accessibility, general access. Again, it's a lot of the frameworks from the first book, but I think we have a formula now. This will stay. It's going to be a while until something else happens to shift. A new gravitational body comes in to pull us in another way. Could that be the media revenues being generated by esports viewership? And could that become compelling enough for us to revisit the business models here? That's certainly one, right, that could be looked at. Could it be something entirely different, like the advent of VR and needing to monetize that in a different way because, say, I don't know, the peripherals matter. And so all of a sudden we're back to, Sega in 1990, But the point is, it does seem in gaming that when we get these models stabilized, they stay for a while. I mean, we are still in console world, despite everybody saying consoles are dead every console cycle for the last 5 console cycles, right? But I do think right now, yeah, it's almost, if you're a publisher, I hate to say it, but I'd kind of feel lucky. Like if I were a chief strategy officer at a big publisher, for gaming in general, I'd feel a bit like, "Phew, well, I sort of know what I need to do here." I mean, there's going to be a lot of executional challenges and partnership challenges, but fundamentally, there's a blueprint, and if I follow it, I'll probably win. And I think that's a nice space for publishers. I think this is also partly why we maybe see publishers struggling with innovation in their titles, because passivity in business model can lead to a passivity in brand management and brand custodianship. But that's a topic for another day.
William, I love it. The fact that you brought up a Lagrange point in our podcast. I mean, I don't know. It's just my inner geek just is madly in love with you. What can I say?
Was I right? Did you Wikipedia it? Was I right? Is that what it is?
No, I didn't. But
I'm gonna Wikipedia it to see if I'm right.
Guys, that sort of wraps up this week's podcast. Lagen, two things. One, any last thoughts on Misfits that you would love to leave with our audience first? And second of all, how can people reach you if you want to be reached?
Yeah, so I think continue to watch Misfits. We have a lot of exciting things that are going to be announced here soon. So you'll kind of see the evolution of the business morphing here to a lot of the topics we discussed today. But if you would like to reach out to me, LinkedIn is easy, and I'm pretty responsive on that. So just follow me, message me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to have any conversation with anyone if they want to pick my brain and learn more about Misfits, learn more about the partnership side. I'm happy to have a conversation.
And for those of you who are listening, it's Lagen Nash, Lagen Nash. Lagen, thank you so much for being on the podcast. William, thank you as always. For our listeners, make sure go buy the book of esports. If you already bought it, go leave a review. So just buying it's not enough. Just reading it's not enough. Go leave a review on Amazon. Tell William how much you love the book, because it is the best book in esports today. Also, make sure to follow us everywhere. TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. It's all at Biz Esports for the most part, or Business of Esports. And as always, we will see you guys next week.